When I was young, I thought life was simple. My father, Mr. Sterling, had plenty of money, so I never had a reason to worry. I didn't study much, and I certainly didn't work. I had everything I ever wanted. If I saw something beautiful in a shop window, I simply asked my father, and he bought it for me without a second thought. My friends often told me to plan for the future, but I just laughed. Why should I work? I would ask them. Why should I worry? My father has enough for all of us. To me, that was the only truth that mattered. Every morning, I woke up late. I had my breakfast served to me in bed, and I spent hours watching TV or scrolling through my phone. In the evenings, I went out with friends. We ate at the most expensive restaurants, wore the finest clothes, and drove fast cars. Life was easy and it was fun. I truly believed it would always stay this way. I never thought about where the money came from. I never thought about work. When I wanted to travel, I packed my bags. When I wanted new shoes, I bought the most expensive pair. Mr. Sterling paid for everything. I never stopped to think about how hard he worked or what happened inside his business. I only lived for today. Tomorrow was a word I didn't care to understand. But one afternoon, my father called me into his study. He looked more serious than usual. "Sit down, Oliver," he said. "We need to talk." I smiled and sat down comfortably. "Yes, Father?" But his face didn't change. He wasn't smiling and he wasn't joking. For the first time, I felt a small flicker of nervousness, though I didn't know why. My father had always been kind. He had never said no to me. But that day, the air in the room felt different. He took a deep breath and looked me straight in the eyes. "Oliver, you are not a child anymore," he said quietly. "You must begin to think about your future." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Father, why? I have everything I need right here." He shook his head slowly. "No, my son. You have everything because I work hard. But life is not always a smooth road. One day things may change. You need to be ready." I didn't understand. I thought he was just worrying for no reason. I gave him a wide smile and said, "Don't worry, Father. Nothing is going to change." He didn't smile back. He looked at me for a very long time, his eyes filled with a look I couldn't read. Then he simply said, "We will see." I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't care to find out. I thought he was just in a bad mood. I stood up, walked out of the room, and went straight to meet my friends. We laughed, we spent money, and we enjoyed the night. I had no idea that my easy life was about to disappear. The next morning, I woke up late as usual. I stretched, picked up my phone, and saw dozens of messages from my friends wanting to go out again. I smiled, got ready, and sprayed my most expensive perfume. But when I reached the living room, I stopped. My father was sitting there waiting for me. His face was like stone. "Sit down," he ordered. I sighed and sat on the edge of the sofa. "Father, I have plans today," I said, sounding annoyed. He didn't seem to hear me. He looked right through me. "You are not a boy anymore, Oliver," he said firmly. "Today you are going to learn what life is really about." I rolled my eyes. "Father, I know what life is." He shook his head. "No, you don't. Come with me." I sat next to my father in the car, feeling confused and a little annoyed. He didn't say a single word as he drove. Usually the city looked bright and full of life to me, but that morning, everything felt different. I noticed people walking fast to reach their jobs, street cleaners working in the dust, and men selling breakfast on the roadside. I had passed these people 1,000 times, but I had never truly seen them until today. After some time, the clean streets disappeared. We entered an industrial area where the buildings were gray and the air smelled of metal and smoke. My father stopped the car in front of a massive iron factory. "Look," my father said, pointing toward the heavy gates. Inside, I saw men drenched in sweat. Giant furnaces roared with fire, and the sound of heavy hammers hitting metal was deafening. It was hot, loud, and suffocating. My father pointed at a worker who was carrying heavy iron rods under the burning sun. "Look at him, Oliver," my father said quietly. "He wakes up before the sun." He works in this heat all day without a single complaint. He does it to put food on the table for his family. He doesn't have a choice. Next, he showed me a woman in a corner, her face covered in soot, carefully sorting through sharp metal scraps. She has been doing this for 20 years, he added. Her hands are scarred and she is exhausted, but she never stops. I stood there frozen. I had never seen anything like this. I had never thought about where the things I used came from. For the first time in my life, I felt small. I felt a strange weight in my chest. It was guilt. Something inside me began to shift. We got back into the car. The silence was even heavier now. My mind was full of the images of the workers and the heat of the furnaces. My life had been so easy, so effortless. Why had I been so blind? Finally, we arrived at a large modern building. This was my father's main office. I had been here before, but only to ask for money. I never stayed more than 5 minutes. But today I followed him inside. The office was a hive of activity. People were rushing with files, phones were ringing constantly, and everyone looked stressed and focused. We went into his private office. My father sat behind his large mahogany desk and looked at me. "Do you know what I do here every day?" he asked. I shrugged, feeling embarrassed. You work." He nodded. "Yes, but it is more than just work. I make decisions that affect hundreds of families. I solve problems that keep me awake at night. I built all of this so you could have a good life. But I did not build it for you to waste it." I looked around at the tired employees outside his glass door. I saw them writing reports and making urgent calls. I realized then that the money I spent so easily was earned through their sweat and my father's stress. Then my father handed me a small notebook and a pen. "From tomorrow you will work here," he said firmly. I was shocked. I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Me? Work here? But father, I don't need to work." He didn't laugh back. "You do," he replied, his voice cold. "Because one day I will not be here to protect you. And when that day comes, what will you do? How will you survive?" I had no answer. I had never imagined a life without his shadow over me. My father had made his decision. My easy life was officially over. Tomorrow my transformation would begin. The next morning I woke up long before my usual time. It felt strange. The house was quiet and the air was cool. I was used to the sun being high in the sky before I even opened my eyes, but today I had a job to do. I got dressed, went downstairs, and found my father waiting by the door. He handed me a small, simple brown bag. "Your lunch," he said. I looked at the bag in surprise. "Lunch? Can't I just go to a restaurant near the office?" He shook his head firmly. "Workers bring their own lunch, Oliver. And today you are a worker." We drove to the factory in silence. When we arrived, he didn't take me to the grand executive floors. Instead, he led me to a small, dusty room at the back of the building. There were rows of desks where people sat hunched over ledgers and computers. A man with gray hair and sharp eyes approached us. He looked like he hadn't smiled in years. "This is Mr. Miller," my father said. "You will work under him. Do exactly as he says." Then, without another word, my father walked away. Mr. Miller didn't offer a handshake. "Follow me," he said curtly. He led me to a small desk piled high with stacks of inventory papers. "You will check these raw material records," he explained. "Find the errors, mark the missing numbers, and organize the files. Work fast." I sat down and began. At first it seemed easy, but after an hour my head started to throb. The numbers began to blur together. My back ached from the hard chair, and the noise from the factory floor downstairs vibrated through the walls. I wanted to stop. I wanted to call my friends. But everyone around me was focused. Nobody was talking. Nobody was resting. This wasn't a game. This was work. By lunchtime I was exhausted. I opened my brown bag to find a simple sandwich and an apple. No fancy spices, no expensive drinks. I ate quietly, watching the other workers. They talked about their children's school or their mounting bills, then quickly got back to their desks. I realized then that I wasn't just sitting in a room, I was sitting among people who held the world together with their hands. For the first time, I felt a deep sense of respect for them. The afternoon was even harder. Mr. Miller came to my desk, flipped through my work, and frowned. "You missed 3 mistakes on the first page," he said. "Do it all again." I wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me. I simply nodded and started over. When the day finally ended, my body felt heavy, but as I walked out and saw my father waiting in the car, I didn't complain. He didn't ask how my day was. He only offered a small smile. And for the first time in my life, I smiled back, not because I was happy, but because I had earned that smile. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. I showed up every morning. At first, my hands were stiff and my mind was tired, but slowly I got better. I made fewer mistakes. I worked faster. Mr. Miller still didn't smile much, but he stopped correcting me. One afternoon, he tapped my shoulder and said, "Good job, Oliver." Those 3 words felt better than any expensive gift I had ever received. I started to understand the value of a penny. I watched my father from a distance now, not as a source of money, but as a leader who carried the weight of a whole company. One evening, he called me into his office. He looked at me for a long time, noticing the change in my posture and the seriousness in my eyes. "You have changed," he said quietly. "At first you were lazy. You didn't care. But now you understand." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small silver key. "This is the key to your own office," he said. "You are ready for more responsibility. You have worked for this and you have earned my trust." I held the key in my palm. It was small, but it felt heavier than anything I had ever owned. It wasn't just a key to a room, it was a key to my future. Looking back, I laugh at the boy I used to be. I thought life was about fast cars and easy money. I was wrong. Life is about effort. It is about building something with your own strength. My father didn't just give me a job, he gave me a life. And now I am ready for whatever the future holds, not because I have money in the bank, but because I finally know how to earn it.